Erased from History: The Lost Black Towns of America. Chapter 1. Forgotten Settlements. Throughout American history, numerous black settlements flourished in the face of adversity. These communities were founded by freed slaves, visionaries, and pioneers who sought refuge from racial oppression and a chance at economic and social independence. Many of these towns, such as Black Dumb in New Mexico, Nicodemus in Kansas, and Rosewood in Florida, thrived with bustling economies, schools, and cultural institutions. However, the existence of these towns was often met with hostility. Systemic racism, discriminatory laws, and violent acts forced many of these settlements into decline. Some were destroyed through racial violence, as seen in the 1921 Tulsa massacre, where Greenwood, a prosperous black district known as Black Wall Street, was burned to the ground. Others fell victim to economic disenfranchisement and land seizures, making survival nearly impossible. Despite the erasure of many of these towns from mainstream historical narratives, their legacy remains an essential part of American history. The descendants of these forgotten settlements continue to fight for recognition, historical preservation, and justice. Understanding their struggles and triumphs sheds light on the resilience of black communities and the importance of reclaiming lost histories. Chapter 2. Land of Black Dreams. The dream of black self-sufficiency and prosperity in America has been a powerful force throughout history. After the Civil War and emancipation, formerly enslaved individuals and free black citizens sought to establish their own communities, places where they could own land, build businesses, and govern themselves without the interference of racial oppression. These aspirations gave rise to dozens of black towns across the country where ambition and resilience laid the foundation for thriving settlements. These towns were not merely places to live, they were symbols of freedom, self-reliance, and a new beginning. Prominent examples include Eatonville, Florida, one of the first self-governing black municipalities, and Mound Bayou, Mississippi, which flourished under the leadership of Isaiah T. Montgomery. These communities fostered black-owned banks, schools, newspapers, and agricultural enterprises, proving that black Americans were capable of building and sustaining prosperous societies despite systemic racism and segregation. However, these dreams were often met with relentless opposition. Jim Crow laws, racial violence, and economic sabotage made it difficult for black towns to maintain their independence. White supremacist groups, envious of black prosperity, targeted these communities with intimidation and violence, sometimes culminating in full-scale massacres as witnessed in places like Rosewood and Tulsa. In addition, discriminatory policies such as redlining and predatory lending practices further hindered black economic progress, leading to the gradual decline of many of these once thriving towns. Even so, the spirit of these black dreamers has never been fully extinguished. Today, historians and activists are working to unearth these lost histories, ensuring that the contributions of black communities are recognized and honored. The land of black dreams may have been threatened, but it has never disappeared. It continues to inspire generations striving for justice, equality, and economic empowerment. Chapter 3. Beacons of Hope. In the face of adversity, black towns across America became beacons of hope, demonstrating resilience, innovation, and a deep commitment to community building. These settlements were not only places of refuge, but also centers of black excellence, where education, entrepreneurship, and culture flourished despite systemic barriers. Many of these communities thrived due to their strong leadership, unity, and the determination of their residents to create a better future. One such beacon of hope was Boley, Oklahoma, a town founded in 1903 that became one of the wealthiest black towns in America. With its own banks, schools, and infrastructure, Boley represented the pinnacle of black economic success and self-sufficiency. Similar towns such as Mound Bayou, Mississippi, and Nicodemus, Kansas served as examples of how black communities could thrive independently, fostering a sense of pride and accomplishment among their residents. Education was a cornerstone of these communities, schools were established to ensure that future generations could break free from the cycles of oppression and illiteracy that had been imposed upon them. Teachers and scholars played a crucial role in shaping these towns, providing knowledge and skills that empowered individuals to uplift their families and contribute to society. Prominent figures such as Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois emphasized the importance of education and economic development, influencing many black towns' approaches to progress. Churches and social organizations also played vital roles in these towns. Places of worship served as not only religious centers, but also as spaces for community organizing, activism, and support. Many churches provided food, shelter, and resources for those in need, reinforcing the strong sense of solidarity among residents. Social clubs, fraternal organizations, and business associations helped foster economic growth and mutual aid networks that enabled black communities to sustain themselves. However, despite their success, these beacons of hope were constantly under threat. Racial hostility, discriminatory policies, and economic disenfranchisement posed challenges that were often difficult to overcome. Many towns struggled to secure funding, resources, and political representation, leaving them vulnerable to outside forces that sought to undermine their progress. Still, the legacy of these towns continues to inspire new generations. Their stories remind us of the power of perseverance, unity, and self-determination. While many of these historic black communities no longer exist in their original form, their impact on American history is undeniable. Today, efforts are being made to preserve their histories, ensuring that their contributions are not forgotten. The beacons of hope that once lit the way for black prosperity continue to shine, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, resilience and hope can lead to greatness. Chapter 4. The struggle for autonomy. The struggle for autonomy was at the heart of the Black Town movement in America. After the abolition of slavery, Black Americans sought to establish self-sufficient communities where they could govern themselves, own land, and create opportunities free from racial discrimination. These towns were not just settlements, they were acts of defiance against systemic oppression and a testament to Black resilience and ingenuity. One of the greatest challenges these towns faced was political autonomy. In a country that sought to disenfranchise Black citizens at every turn, securing the right to vote, hold office, and implement policies that favored their communities was an uphill battle. Many Black towns established their own governing bodies, law enforcement agencies, and economic policies to protect their interests. Towns like Mound Bayou, Mississippi, and Boley, Oklahoma, became models of Black self-governance, with Black mayors, sheriffs, and business leaders leading their people toward progress. Economic independence was another crucial aspect of autonomy. Black communities sought to create their own economic systems by establishing Black-owned businesses, banks, and agricultural enterprises. This self-reliance was necessary to counteract the widespread economic discrimination Black people faced, including being denied loans, fair wages, and business opportunities. Successful Black towns such as Greenwood and Tulsa, Oklahoma, later known as Black Wall Street, demonstrated that Black entrepreneurs could build thriving business districts that supported their communities. However, this economic success often made Black towns targets of white supremacist violence, as seen in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, where white mobs destroyed Black-owned businesses and killed hundreds of residents. Social autonomy was also vital to these communities. Black towns prioritized education, health care, and cultural institutions that were free from racist ideologies. Schools and churches became centers of empowerment, educating children and adults alike on Black history, economics, and self-sufficiency. Historically, Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, played a significant role in preparing young leaders to take charge of their communities and advocate for civil rights. Religious leaders and educators worked together to instill values of unity, progress, and resilience, ensuring that the next generation could continue the fight for autonomy. Despite their successes, these towns were constantly under attack. State and federal policies, including Jim Crow laws, land dispossession, and redlining, made it nearly impossible for many black communities to sustain themselves. Some towns were physically destroyed through acts of racial terrorism, while others fell due to economic isolation and political suppression. Still, the spirit of autonomy lived on in the form of black activism, civil rights movements, and the push for economic justice. Today, the struggle for autonomy continues. Black entrepreneurs, activists, and community leaders are working to rebuild economic independence through cooperative economics, land ownership initiatives, and political engagement. The history of black towns serves as a reminder that self-governance and self-determination are possible even in the face of immense adversity. The struggle for autonomy was never just about survival, it was about the right to live freely, prosper, and define one's own future. Chapter 5: Storms of Fear and Hate. As black towns across America flourished, they became the target of deep-seated racial hatred and resentment. White supremacists and segregationists viewed the success of these communities as a direct challenge to their dominance and sought to dismantle them through violence, intimidation, and legislation. This chapter explores the terror inflicted upon black towns by those who sought to erase their achievements and the fear that permeated everyday life for their residents. Racial violence was a constant threat. The very existence of prosperous black communities challenged the racist ideology that black people were incapable of self-governance and economic success. White mobs, fueled by resentment and false accusations, launched brutal attacks on black settlements. The 1898 Wilmington Massacre in North Carolina, for example, saw white supremacists overthrow a black-led government, killing dozens and forcing many black residents to flee. Similarly, the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre decimated Greenwood, Oklahoma, a thriving black economic district known as Black Wall Street, killing hundreds and leaving thousands homeless. Such massacres were not isolated incidents, but part of a systematic campaign to destroy black prosperity. Legal and economic tactics were also used to undermine black towns. Jim Crow laws enforced segregation, making it difficult for black communities to access resources and infrastructure. Many black business owners were denied loans, subjected to unfair taxation, and faced boycotts that strangled economic growth. The federal government, through redlining and urban renewal projects, actively dismantled black neighborhoods by denying them investment and displacing residents through eminent domain. Towns like Seneca Village in New York were destroyed to make way for Central Park, and others were flooded or repurposed under the guise of development projects. Despite these threats, black communities continued to resist. Some armed themselves against white violence, forming self-defense groups and seeking legal avenues for justice. Others moved to more welcoming regions, carrying their skills and knowledge with them. The resilience of black towns in the face of relentless persecution is a testament to the unyielding spirit of their people. Though many of these towns were lost, their stories remind us of the price paid for black progress and the ongoing fight against racial injustice. Chapter 6: Burning Towns, Fading Lights. The burning of black towns across America was not just an act of violence, but a deliberate attempt to erase black prosperity and self-sufficiency. From the late 19th to the mid-20th century, dozens of thriving black communities were set ablaze by white mobs, fueled by hatred, fear, and economic envy. These violent attacks sought to destroy not just buildings, but also the dreams and aspirations of black citizens who had worked tirelessly to build their own town. One of the most infamous examples is the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, in which Greenwood, a thriving black district known as Black Wall Street, was reduced to ashes. Over 2 days, white mobs looted and set fire to homes, businesses and churches, killing hundreds of black residents and leaving thousands homeless. Similar acts of racial terror occurred in places like Rosewood, Florida in 1923 and Ocoee, Florida in 1920, where entire black communities were burned to the ground. The destruction of these towns was not just spontaneous acts of violence. It was often sanctioned by local authorities who refused to intervene or in some cases actively participated in the attacks. Fire departments were ordered not to put out the flames, law enforcement turned a blind eye, and courts failed to hold perpetrators accountable. In many cases, survivors were forced to flee, leaving behind everything they had built, and their land was seized by white residents or local governments. Beyond physical destruction, the psychological and economic toll on black communities was devastating. The fear of violence discouraged black economic advancement, as many realized that success could make them targets. Families who had once been self-sufficient were pushed into poverty and displacement, forced to start over in unfamiliar and often hostile environments. The destruction of these towns also meant the loss of generational wealth, setting black families back economically for decades. Yet despite the flames, the spirit of resilience never died. Survivors and their descendants have continued to fight for justice, seeking recognition, reparations, and historical acknowledgement. Today, efforts to reclaim and commemorate these lost towns are gaining momentum as historians and activists work to uncover the hidden truths of America's past. The memory of these burning towns remains a painful reminder of racial injustice, but also a testament to the enduring strength of black communities who refuse to be erased. Chapter 7: When Justice Was Silent. Throughout American history, justice has often turned a blind eye to the suffering of black communities. This was especially true for the black towns that were destroyed through violence, economic sabotage, and legal manipulation. When these communities were attacked, burned, or displaced, there was rarely any accountability. Courts, law enforcement, and government officials often sided with white aggressors or refused to intervene altogether. One of the most glaring examples of this injustice was the failure to prosecute those responsible for the 1921 Tulsa race massacres. Despite the mass destruction of Black Wall Street, the deaths of hundreds of black residents, and the loss of millions of dollars in black wealth, not a single white perpetrator was ever convicted. Survivors who sought compensation were denied by the legal system, which deemed their cases invalid. Similar patterns emerged in Rosewood, Florida, and Ocoee, Florida, where the legal system refused to acknowledge or address the crimes committed against black residents. Beyond mob violence, discriminatory laws and policies ensured that black towns remained vulnerable. Jim Crow laws kept black citizens from fully participating in the political and economic life of the country. Courts upheld racist policies such as redlining, which denied black communities access to loans and housing. The legal system allowed land theft through eminent domain and fraudulent schemes that transferred black-owned property into white hands. This systemic injustice made it nearly impossible for many black towns to recover after suffering devastating losses. The silence of justice extended to historical narratives as well. For decades, the destruction of black towns was left out of textbooks, and mainstream history failed to acknowledge the extent of these tragedies. Families who had lost everything were forced to remain silent out of fear of further retribution. This erasure compounded the pain of those who had already suffered, making it harder to seek reparations or public recognition. However, the fight for justice has never truly ended. Activists, historians, and descendants of these lost black towns have worked tirelessly to bring these stories to light. Legal battles for reparations continue, and efforts to preserve and commemorate these towns are gaining ground. While justice was silent for many years, the voices of those who refuse to forget are growing louder, demanding acknowledgement, restitution, and a commitment to ensuring that such injustices are never repeated. Chapter 8: Stolen Land Erased History. The theft of black land and the erasure of black history in America is one of the greatest injustices rarely acknowledged in mainstream narratives. Throughout history, black communities that flourished economically and socially were often displaced, their land stolen through legal loopholes, violent takeovers, or outright fraud. These acts were not only about land, they were about power, control, and the systemic effort to undermine black self-sufficiency. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, black landowners faced immense challenges in retaining their property. In many cases, white supremacists, backed by corrupt legal systems, used forged documents, coercion, and even murder to strip black families of their rightful land. One notorious method was through fraudulent tax assessments, where black property owners were suddenly hit with exorbitant taxes they could not afford. When they failed to pay, their land was seized and auctioned off at unfair prices, often to white buyers. Another method of land theft was eminent domain, where the government seized black-owned land under the guise of public development projects. Many thriving black neighborhoods and towns were bulldozed to make way for highways, parks, or other infrastructure projects that disproportionately displaced black residents. The construction of Central Park in New York City, for example, erased Seneca Village, a prosperous black community in the 1850s. Similar stories played out in cities across the country, where urban renewal projects were used as a tool to displace black communities. Beyond physical land theft, history itself has been erased. The destruction of black towns was often followed by deliberate attempts to remove any trace of their existence. Newspapers underreported or distorted the events, official records were lost or destroyed, and schools omitted these histories from their curricula. Many descendants of displaced black families have had to rely on oral history to piece together their lost heritage, as official records fail to acknowledge the injustices committed. Despite these injustices, there is a growing movement to reclaim stolen land and restore erased history. Activists, historians, and descendants are fighting for legal restitution, historical recognition, and reparations. Efforts to uncover forgotten black towns, mark their locations, and educate the public about their legacies are gaining momentum. While the land may have been taken and the history buried, the truth is emerging, ensuring that future generations will remember and honor the resilience of black communities that refuse to be erased. Chapter 9, Deception and Decline. Chapter 10, Dreams Buried Under Ruins. The destruction of black towns in America was not just about the loss of buildings and businesses. It was the shattering of dreams, the extinguishing of hope, and the silencing of a people who dared to envision a better future. These communities represented the aspirations of formerly enslaved people, pioneers and visionaries who built thriving societies despite the odds. When these towns were burned, flooded, or dismantled, generations of progress were buried beneath the ruins. In places like Greenwood, Rosewood, and Seneca Village, black families had worked tirelessly to establish stability, security, and prosperity. They built schools to educate their children, churches to strengthen their faith, and businesses to sustain their economy. These towns were symbols of black excellence and self-determination. But time and again, white mobs, discriminatory policies, and economic oppression tore them apart. The aftermath of these tragedies left countless families displaced, often with nothing but their memories and the clothes on their backs. The psychological toll of these losses cannot be understated. The survivors and their descendants carried the trauma of knowing that their success had made them targets. Many were forced to move into segregated cities, where opportunities were scarce and discrimination was rampant. The loss of land and wealth contributed to the racial wealth gap that persists to this day. Even those who tried to rebuild faced continued oppression through redlining, restrictive covenants, and racist laws that prevented them from reclaiming what was stolen. Yet buried beneath the ruins, the spirit of these towns remains. The descendants of these communities continue to search for their lost histories, to uncover forgotten records and to tell the stories that were silenced for too long. Across the country, historians, activists, and families are working to ensure that the dreams of these towns are not forgotten. Through memorials, documentaries, and legal battles for restitution, the legacy of these communities lives on. The ruins may remain, but so does the resilience of those who refuse to let their history be erased. Chapter 11. Who will bear witness? When black towns were destroyed, their histories were often erased alongside them. For generations, these stories remained buried under layers of silence, fear, and neglect. But as the descendants of these communities rise to reclaim their past, the question remains, who will bear witness to these injustices and who will ensure they are never forgotten? For decades, survivors of racial massacres and forced displacements were silenced, either by threats of violence or the sheer indifference of society. The legal system did not offer them justice, and history books refused to record their suffering. Those who attempted to speak out were often met with hostility or disbelief. Some, fearing further retribution, chose to carry their pain in silence, passing down only whispered accounts to their children and grandchildren. Yet history cannot remain buried forever. Today, scholars, activists, and descendants are working to uncover the truth about these lost black towns. Through oral history projects, archival research, and public memorials, they are piecing together the stories that were nearly erased. Documentaries, books, and historical exhibits are finally bringing these hidden histories into the public consciousness. The fight for recognition is not just about the past, it is about justice in the present and future. The act of bearing witness is not just about acknowledging what happened, but about taking action. It is about demanding reparations for stolen land and livelihoods. It is about pushing for educational reforms so that future generations learn the true history of America. It is about ensuring that no community ever suffers the same fate again. The responsibility of remembering these lost black towns does not rest solely on the descendants of those who suffered. It is a collective responsibility, one that requires society to confront its past and commit to truth and reconciliation. The ruins may be covered by highways and shopping malls, but the stories of those who once thrived there must be brought back into the light. The question is not just who will bear witness, but who will take up the cause of justice and remembrance. Chapter 12. Echoes from the Ashes. The echoes of the past never truly fade, especially when the voices of those who suffered injustice remain unheard. The destruction of black towns across America left more than just physical ruins. It left a lingering void in history, a silence that must be broken. Generations later, the memories of these lost communities are still felt in the stories passed down by descendants, in the soil that once bore witness to thriving black excellence, and in the persistent struggle for justice and recognition. Though fire and violence consume these towns, the legacies of those who built them endure. The descendants of these communities continue to search for remnants of what was lost, old photographs, legal documents, and oral histories that piece together the lives of their ancestors. Historical researchers and activists are working tirelessly to unearth records buried in archives, to map out once thriving black towns, and to demand recognition for the tragedies that mainstream narratives have ignored for too long. For many, the echoes from the ashes come in the form of unanswered questions. Who were the people who lived here? What were their dreams and aspirations? How might history have been different if they had been allowed to thrive? These echoes drive efforts to educate future generations, to include these stories in school curriculums, and to ensure that America acknowledges its past rather than whitewashes it. The struggle for justice is not just about remembering what was lost, it is about reclaiming what was stolen. Some families have begun legal battles to reclaim land that was wrongfully taken from their ancestors. Others are fighting for public recognition through memorials, museum exhibits, and historical landmarks that acknowledge the existence and destruction of black towns. These efforts are not just about history, They are about shaping a future where racial injustices are addressed rather than erased. The echoes of the past call for action in the present. To hear them is to acknowledge the pain of those who came before, to honor their resilience, and to carry forward their fight for justice. The ashes may have long settled, but their stories still rise, waiting to be told, demanding to be heard. Chapter 13. Yet We Rise. Despite the systemic efforts to erase black towns from history, the resilience of their descendants has ensured that their legacies endure. Though these communities were physically destroyed, their spirit lives on in the fight for justice, education, and recognition. The phrase, "Yet we rise," encapsulates the unwavering determination of Black Americans to overcome the injustices of the past and reclaim their rightful place in history. For many, rising means seeking justice through legal channels. Activists and legal experts have fought for reparations and land restitution for the families who were forcibly removed from their communities. Cases such as those of Bruce's Beach in California and Tulsa's Greenwood district have sparked national conversations about the need to rectify past wrongs. While these battles are often met with resistance, they represent a crucial step in the ongoing struggle for justice. Education has become another powerful tool for reclaiming the narrative. Black historians, educators, and scholars are working to ensure that the stories of lost Black towns are taught in schools and universities. Public memorials, museum exhibits, and digital archives are being established to preserve the history that was once deliberately erased. Through these efforts, younger generations are learning about the rich heritage of Black self-sufficiency and resilience. Economic empowerment also plays a crucial role in this resurgence. Many Black entrepreneurs and community leaders are working to build new businesses and initiatives that honor the spirit of the lost towns. By investing in Black-owned enterprises and supporting Black-led community projects, the descendants of these communities are ensuring that the legacy of economic independence continues. Beyond legal battles and economic efforts, cultural expression has also been a means of rising from the ashes. Writers, filmmakers, and artists have dedicated their work to telling the stories of lost Black towns. Novels, films, and documentaries have shed light on these forgotten histories, bringing national and global attention to the resilience of Black communities. These cultural works serve as both a tribute to the past and a call to action for the future. The phrase, "Yet we rise," is not just about remembrance, it is about action. It is about continuing the fight for justice, preserving the truth of history, and ensuring that the sacrifices of those who built these towns were not in vain. Black communities continue to rise, not just from the ruins of the past, but toward a future where their contributions and resilience are fully acknowledged and honored. Chapter 14. Reclaiming the Narrative. The power to control history lies in the hands of those who tell it. For too long, the narratives of Black towns that once flourished in America have been manipulated, suppressed, or erased altogether. However, a new wave of historians, scholars, activists, and descendants are working tirelessly to reclaim the narrative and bring the true stories of these lost communities to light. Reclaiming the narrative is an act of resistance against historical erasure. It involves uncovering hidden truths, correcting misinformation, and ensuring that the legacy of Black towns is accurately represented in history books, media, and public discourse. For years, mainstream American history has omitted or downplayed the existence and destruction of these communities. Instead, stories of Black success were often rewritten to fit narratives of dependency or inferiority, obscuring the reality of Black economic and social self-sufficiency. One of the most significant efforts in reclaiming the narrative has come from grassroots organizations and community-led initiatives. Families of those who lived in towns like Greenwood, Rosewood, and Seneca Village are using genealogy and historical research to trace their ancestry, share their stories, and demand recognition. By piecing together old photographs, land deeds, legal documents, and oral histories, they are restoring what was stolen not just land, but identity and dignity. Educational institutions are also playing a crucial role in rewriting the narrative. Universities and historical organizations have launched research projects dedicated to uncovering the true histories of Black towns. Public school curriculums are slowly being updated to include the stories of these communities, ensuring that future generations understand the full scope of American history. Museums and historical societies have begun dedicating exhibits to the legacy of these towns, preserving artifacts and personal testimonies to keep their memory alive. The digital age has provided another powerful platform for reclamation. Social media campaigns, online archives, and documentary films have made it possible to reach millions with stories that were once hidden. Hashtags like Black Wall Street and Remember Rosewood trend on social media, sparking discussions and raising awareness. Filmmakers and authors are producing works that highlight the resilience of Black towns, challenging dominant narratives that ignored or misrepresented them. Reclaiming the narrative is not just about education, it is about justice. Many activists argue that acknowledging these historical injustices is a necessary step toward reparations. Some cities and states have begun to formally apologize for their roles in the destruction of Black towns, while others have launched initiatives to provide restitution to the descendants of displaced families. The fight for recognition and justice continues, as communities push for policies that not only acknowledge past wrongs, but also work toward rectifying them. Ultimately, reclaiming the narrative is about empowerment. It is about ensuring that Black history is told by Black voices, that the stories of resilience and achievement are not overshadowed by tragedy, and that the legacy of these communities is preserved for future generations. The past cannot be changed, but the way it is remembered can be. By reclaiming the narrative, the descendants of lost Black towns are not only honoring their ancestors, they are shaping the future. Chapter 15, Rebuilding the Memory. The erasure of Black towns from history was not just an act of destruction, but an attempt to erase memory itself. However, the memory of these communities is being revived through historical preservation, activism, and storytelling. Rebuilding the memory of lost Black towns is an essential part of restoring justice and ensuring that their legacy is not forgotten. One of the primary ways memory is being rebuilt is through historical research and documentation. Scholars, historians, and descendants of displaced families are working tirelessly to recover records, maps, and oral histories that tell the true story of these communities. Universities and research institutions have taken on projects to unearth archives that were buried, lost, or intentionally obscured. This process of historical reclamation is not just about collecting facts. It is about restoring dignity to those who were wronged. Another key effort in rebuilding memory is through the creation of public memorials and museums. Across the country, plaques, monuments, and exhibits are being established to acknowledge the existence and destruction of these towns. In Tulsa, the Greenwood Rising Museum serves as a powerful tribute to the resilience of Black Wall Street. Similar initiatives are being proposed in other locations where Black towns once stood, ensuring that their memory remains alive for future generations. Education is also playing a crucial role in reviving these histories. Many school curriculums are now incorporating lessons on the destruction of Black towns, ensuring that students learn about this overlooked chapter of American history. Public programs, documentaries, and digital storytelling projects are further amplifying these narratives, reaching audiences who may never have encountered these stories before. Social media campaigns and online platforms are providing a space where descendants can share their family histories and connect with others who have similar stories of displacement and resilience. Legal and political efforts are also part of rebuilding memory. Some families have begun the process of reclaiming stolen land through lawsuits and restitution claims. In certain cases, local governments have issued formal apologies and taken steps to address past injustices. The push for reparations and recognition is gaining momentum as more people demand that America acknowledge and rectify its history of racial land dispossession. Rebuilding memory is not just about looking backward, it is also about shaping the future. By preserving the stories of Black towns, ensuring they are recognized and advocating for justice, activists and historians are ensuring that these communities live on. The memory of these towns is a testament to the strength, creativity, and perseverance of Black Americans who built thriving communities despite the odds. Through collective efforts, the truth is being restored and the legacy of these lost towns is being secured for generations to come.